This is Jim Defelice.
And this is Dan McLaughlin, and you're watching the Break It Down show.
Hey, fellas, we're going to talk some baseball today. Jerome had to bow out, weather in the Northeast, and I don't know, probably a bit of a coward if you ask me, but, we're here to have a good time and talk some baseball. So I thought we would, I guess I don't want to get
Oh,
your
wait a
guys'
second.
way
Wait. I have
yeah.
to stand up. I have to stick up for my fellow Yankee fan there. I think Jerome, right now, Jerome is very deep in the red up in Maine. That's Boston Red Sox territory.
Yeah.
It's pretty clear what happened here. I think that the Red Sox got wind of the fact that he was going to be on the podcast, and they took him out.
That's a likely scenario. Actually, I'm with you on this. And
I don't know. Red Sox can't get anybody out these days.
Well, that's true too. That is a good point.
Last year, Dan, the Mets took a real big swing at being great, signed a bunch of talent, spent a bunch of money. And we've all been around long enough to know that, like, just because you spend a bunch of money, in particular with the Mets, it doesn't mean you're going to be competitive. But fans are like, why did you spend a bunch of money? And so what are your thoughts? Like, do you want the Mets to spend a bunch of money? And then when they do, are you confident that they've done it? I mean, the Dodgers just spent $1 billion, literally. And could easily be one and done. It doesn't buy you success in the major leagues reliably.
No, I mean, but the Dodgers know what they're doing, and they have a strong talent base underneath that. I mean, frankly, I think the amount of money the Dodgers spent is quite possibly very unwise. I really think the Ohtani contract is nuts, but. Oh, obviously he is, an enormously valuable property. But I think it all depends what you're spending the money on. And look, I mean, one of the big things the Mets failed to do in 2023 was to get themselves a good bullpen. And the number one reason for that was that they, the keystone of all of that was Edwin Diaz, and he went down before the season. So you were already in a hole. Although David Robertson was able to fill in adequately, he pitched quite well in the closer role, but they needed him as the setup man. And it sort of does a cascading effect down the bullpen when you go down your ace. I think the effort to replace Jacob deGrom with Justin Verlander was, under the circumstances, the most reasonable decision they could make. It didn't work. Verlander was not the same pitcher. He was reasonably effective, but he was not the same pitcher he had been in 2022. Max Scherzer was more broken down than he had been, which is what happens when you have really old guys, particularly old pitchers. And so, it was sort of the theory behind the roster was not a terrible one. They took their swing, they took a big swing in 2022. They came up just short. With some aging members of the core, it was a reasonable gamble to say, let's put some more money on this. But clearly now that didn't work. The veteran pitchers are gone. They're kind of going a bit back to the drawing board, and it kind of feels already as if the season has already gotten away from them before it started. The one thing that people were really excited to watch, even if the team wasn't good, is Ronnie Mauricio. The core of young players, but Mauricio is a guy who came up and had this explosive athleticism at the end of the season. He tore his ACL, so we're not going to see him this year. The Mets, played big in the free agent market, and they didn't land any of the people they were after. I would have been quite happy, for example, to see them go out and put the kind of resources into some of the people that the Yankees got. I would have loved to see them get Soto or Stroman, but not to be.
The question I have is, how I mean, all the Met fans I know, and I'm not anti-Mets, unlike a lot of Yankee fans, but all the Met fans I know are, they're pretty depressed about about the season. I mean, I was listening to Fan the other day, and in between arguing about what sort of shirt you should wear in the office, they were talking about whether Alonso, their best player, should be traded. Um, you know, I, that's the state of the Mets, and I don't know. I mean, how do you feel? You're a Met fan. What do you think this season's going to do?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty despairing. The one thing, by the way, the Mets that did go very well for the Mets last year was getting off the hook for the Carlos Correa contract, because that would have been $300 million very poorly spent. I mean, I think there's been a lot of deflation of optimism. There was this big boom in optimism that Steve Cohen was going to be playing with the big boys. He had the deep pockets to do this. He wasn't going to be as self-defeating as the Wilpons. I'm between sports and politics these days. I kind of have a lot of the feeling of, somebody at the wheel who doesn't even know which direction we're trying to be going in. It's like one of my all-time favorite baseball quotes was from Luis Polonia when he was at the Yankees about 1989. And
I know where you're going.
And Polonia's line is, George Steinbrenner is only interested in one thing, and I don't know what it is. Which I thought captured that particular Steinbrenner era very well. So, certainly the Met, that was the way the Mets fans felt with Wilpon. That the team didn't even know what it was doing. And I think there was a lot of confidence that even if Cohen didn't get everything right, that he was a guy coming in who had the resources, was willing to put the resources into the team rather than trying to use the team to prop up his own, house of debt cards. And that he was going to hire people who actually, were serious baseball people. And I think a lot of that confidence is deflated. And now people are thinking, well, Alonso is going to walk as a free agent. So, because, he's got Boris. So, when Boris represents a guy, you don't re-sign him. You can't do it. So, not until he's on the open market. So you have to think about trading him, which is dismal. But, I think Alonso, there is a serious question about whether Alonso is a guy. I think he's a guy from a fan perspective. You want him to spend his whole career in the uniform. From a purely analytical perspective, is he necessarily the guy that you want to have tied up in like a, $35 million a year contract when he's like 36 years old? I'm not sure.
Well, I don't know that he's worth 35 million, but he's going to hit. I think he has more than a reasonable chance of hitting 400 home runs. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt about that. And he's got a decent shot at 500. And maybe we'll talk about that number later on if we end up talking about the Hall of Fame. But I don't know. He's I guess if he's looking for a 10-year, $35 million a year contract, maybe you're right. Maybe in that case, you try to restock, before the deadline and that. But I think in the meantime, I think if I were, I'm going to a couple of Met games this year, and I sure want to see him and would love to see him jack a couple out.
Yeah, and I mean, one other thing that really hurts for Mets fans after how 2022 went down and seeing how 2023 went down is the sense that Ronald Acuna being hurt and then not really himself in 2022 was a window of opportunity that has now closed.
Yeah. I want to slide over to the Yanks real quick, but then I want to get to the Hall of Fame. And Jim, because you guys are both writers, and maybe this story hasn't taken off. I've mentioned it a couple of times, but here is my buddy Phil on ALS Day in LA, and I'm not making fun of stuff here, right? But Phil is talking to, that's Aaron Judge, and you can't see just off the screen is Garrett Cole, but I swear to God, this is true. Aaron Judge says, Phil, I'm going to hit you 2 home runs today, right? He does not hit 2 home runs that day. Mookie Betts does. And then the next day, Aaron Judge breaks his toe. And that record from that day forward for the Yankees is 48-55. Tell me this is not Lou and the Babe going, Aaron, if you say you cannot let the dog hit 2 home runs, tell me, you guys are writers. Not a better story than what has been presented. This is classic.
Anybody, the fact that this story is coming from an LA Dodger fanboy, we just have to put that whole thing in perspective. The only witness we know here, I'm sorry, Pete, I don't know.
Oh man,
think about Mookie. Come on, who, an ex Red Sox of all people. Come on. Let's be real.
It is. Look, forget the fact that I was at the game and I like the Dodgers and all that. That aside, this is a little delicious. You have ALS, Lou. You have promising a sick guy, home runs, Babe. And then the home team delivers on the promise. There is something deliciously story good about that. I'm appealing to the writer here, not the fan side, And then the next day he runs into a fence and hurts his toe,
Well, what comes to mind for me, of course, is the Seinfeld episode where they promised that Paul O'Neill's going to hit a couple of home runs, and he's like, "What'd you do that for? Hitting home runs is hard."
Yeah.
It is a great story. So if you can build something around it, Pete, go to town.
Yeah. Either way, it's just one of those funny, ironic, or as I like to say, to be funny, ironical, because there's some irony in that as well. But it's just one of those funny moments in baseball. And, it's like something that Joe Posnanski gets to write about in a book the next time he writes one of these great books is like, you'll never believe it, right? It's like one of those kind of, you'd never believe this is happening, yeah. And then the minute Aaron Judge comes back, the Yankees start winning. And it's like one of those almost could be was stories. But that does bring to the point, Aaron Judge signs one of these massive contracts. He was not a young guy when he got going, and big dudes like this. Well, you have another one on the team, and again, I'm not mocking the Yankees, but these are very hard contracts to deliver on. So, can Aaron Judge live up to the contract? And what does living up to it mean? Like if he delivers a ring, in the next 5 years, let's say, because after that, who knows what happens with him? But what are your thoughts on this contract? And Aaron Judge is incredible. He's a captain. He smashes the living daylights out of the ball, but can he and Stanton, can they be special long enough to pay for their contracts? Because they're both very expensive.
Okay, so I think we have to separate those two guys because I think we already see what happens in long contracts in the person of Stanton. And hopefully his contract's got a lot to run, so hopefully they can get 2 more decent years out of him, and I don't know. Well, let's see what happens. I sure hope they do.
Yeah, me too.
Judge, but as you were just talking about the Yankees record last year and what happened when Judge was not in that lineup. He's not the only reason that they didn't do well in that stretch or actually in that season. But yeah, he's huge. Is he worth the contract? Is anybody worth that? Yeah. That big contract? But the truth is that's what the going rate is now, and it's being stretched out as we see from the Dodgers. And I think inevitably all of those 10-year contract is just you're going to have some down years at the very end, especially now that we're in theory anyway not using steroids or other enhancements. So, but that's the way baseball is going now. That's I don't know how you argue against it. I'll tell you one thing: if the Yankees had not re-signed, if the Yankees had not re-signed Judge, they probably would have. The Yankee fans would have burned down Yankee Stadium. I think the Yankees really had to do that. They're probably going to be honest, they're probably going to be in the same boat. With that young fellow that they got to play the
Soto?
outfield. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that trade that trade made very little sense unless the Yankees, sign him to a long-term deal, and it is going to cost. And hopefully, everything I've seen, he'll be absolutely worth it.
Yeah.
He's not worth it in one sense. Nobody's worth it in one sense, but
Yeah.
but in baseball terms, absolutely.
And Soto, Soto, what was it? He was, I think from about maybe mid-May on, he hit about 299. So, whatever funk he was in the previous year, which he was still productive. The guy's got so much, power and walks and stuff that he's still very productive if he's hitting 240. But whatever funk he was in terms of batting average, he had already, bounced back from for most of the season. So.
Yeah, and the sad thing is 240 would have been still pretty good, compared to most of the other Yankees last year. But that's a sad story. We're here to be positive about the upcoming season.
One question I have too for you with Judge, there's evolving theory on lineups and everything. When Dusty Baker first picked up Barry Bonds, he's like, let me put 4 people in front of Barry because Barry is there. And there's like this misnomer that you have to protect Barry Bonds in the lineup, or you have to protect Aaron Judge in the lineup. And it's incorrect. Aaron Judge is his own protection. It's like, I dare you to throw the ball over the plate because I'm going to destroy it, right? And so you put Soto in front of Judge for sure, but if you have a middling player who makes pretty decent contact and like maybe tears up fastballs or whatever it is, you can protect that player with Aaron Judge coming behind him. Because if you dare to walk that person, if they get on base 36% of the time, oh man, you're going to get hurt a lot. And so would you back Aaron Judge up in the lineup a little bit to stuff somebody in front of them?
No, I think the more important decision is who you have batting first, because not only do you want somebody that gets on base, obviously, a lot, especially if Judge and Soto or Soto and Judge are coming up. Boone has already said that it's going to be Soto and Boone, by the way. Soto and Judge, excuse me. But you want somebody that not only is a pretty good on-base person coming up, but also somebody that'll take a lot of pitches so that the batters, coming up after him can kind of get a feel for how the pitcher is doing. Right. I don't know. There's been a lot of studies and, just attempts at kind of teasing out what the best batting order is and everything. I'm a little bit old school in that I want at least one person with, high batting on base percentage, up before Judge, but I don't know. In the old days, I guess they would have probably batted Judge fourth at cleanup. Yeah. Again, on the theory that you're espousing, but having them come up in the top third of the batting order means over the course of a long season, he'll have a few more at bats, and in theory, anyway, a few more opportunities to hit a home run or to get a hit.
Yeah, and you've got Verdugo, who has pretty good bat to ball skill, right? And you put him out there, and he might pick up a couple extra fastballs too, and get on base. And he's not horrible at being on base. He's not like a 400 on base percentage guy, but then again, you got the big
Ricky
dude
Henderson.
No, right? Yeah,
Not.
But who is, right? I mean, Ricky Henderson would warp the game around him. You don't have that guy, but no one does.
No. Well, Ricky Henderson in this, can you imagine Ricky Henderson? How many stolen bases would he have? Now.
Oh my God, he would
probably about 20, but he's almost 60 years old. So.
That's right. Yeah, always a great joke. Always. Do you have thoughts at all, Dan, on lineup construction with someone like Judge? And then, by the way, where do you put Stanton in this lineup? And I look. I want Stanton.
Any day you can put Stanton in the lineup is a victory. But honestly, I think with this lineup, I might just, I might be the mad scientist and say we're going to lead off Soto because that's the guy who's going to get on base the most, and you maximize the number of plate appearances. I seem to remember the Mariners, I think, experimented with some of that, like at one point with putting, I think, A-Rod second and Griffey
Mhm.
third, trying to front load the big power guys right up in the front of the lineup. If they're also your best on base guys. So there's nothing for that. I mean, obviously the Mets at least have a natural number one guy in Nimmo. So
Yeah.
so at least they've got one of their needs taken care of.
I think behind Judge, you're more likely to see. It depends on what Stanton does. Obviously, he had a terrible season last year. Let's see what he does. But you're more likely, and one of the key players, I think, for the Yankees this year is going to be Rizzo. The first baseman who, unfortunately, because of concussion, missed much of what he tried playing. He also missed much of the last season. I mean, if he has a good year, there's an RBI guy, if you're, I agree with you about Judge not really needing protection. Judge is his own protection, but at least in theory, if you follow that kind of thinking, Rizzo can provide that, and the guys that come up afterwards aren't, at least in theory, most of them aren't too bad either.
Yeah, I actually kind of feel like maybe the most pivotal guy in that lineup is Volpe, because that's a guy with a lot of talent and a lot of holes. And some of that's it's just being young, right? Like, he's definitely a guy I could see just taking a big leap forward, maybe this year, maybe next year, like kind of out of the blue.
Absolutely. Volpe would be great. And we're talking about, for non-Yankee fans, their rookie shortstop, who's much heralded and came up. And he had, for a rookie, he had a decent year. I think there was, unfortunately, so much hype in New York that, that some fans were saying, oh, this is the guy that we've been waiting since he basically is, since he was almost in the cradle, for crying out loud. But he had he's got a lot of potential. Peraza is another one. I don't know that he really has a place where he's going to play. He's penciled into third base. A lot of people think he's actually a better shortstop than Volpe, but he's not quite. He hasn't shown it yet. He hasn't shown the ability to hit yet.
And what are your thoughts on Dominguez in the outfield? Is he ready
when
to take a big role?
comes back, when he comes back, if he comes back from his injury, because that really would change the kind of the atmosphere of the outfield. Dominguez at center field, you got Soto in left, you have Judge in right, and suddenly you have a actually pretty decent outfield. I don't really like having Judge in center field. I think he's a great fielder, don't get me wrong, but I think that he hopefully he won't run into any fences or walls out there, but also at least in theory, may break down a little bit faster there.
There's something to be said for telling your captain, your superhero outfielder, to not smash into walls. It's okay for certain kinds of players to do that. Like Lenny Dykstra, smash your face into a wall you want, but Judge, we want you to pull up and play it off the bounce.
Well, and when you're talking about Aaron Judge too, he's also a danger to the wall. So
exactly.
I mean, that was always one of the things that most impressed me about Pete Rose was that you had a guy who was just ran headlong into walls, infielders, catchers, everything, and like never ever got hurt.
Yeah.
I don't know, Pete. If you're looking into conspiracy theories,
yes.
I mean, was there always a wall there? I mean, did they move that wall? Was that kind of placed there, just for the Yankee game? I don't know.
Yeah, that wall has always been there. It's more padded now than it's ever been. There used to be a knee-high wall, was all metal, kneecapping. By the way, I love that Chicago has a cement ring. The Cubs have a cement ring around their entire base of their brick wall with metal roll-up things. And people complained about Towles Hill in Houston as being dangerous. Like the Chicago has like the most hazardous outfield wall of anybody. It's covered by ivy, which is kind of soft unless you hit the metal roll-up wall.
Yeah, that's true. But then again, the other danger in Chicago while you're playing there are the bleacher creatures. So, the opposing team always has to take that into account. So
Yeah, you need like a rain slicker because you're going to get beer dumped on you for sure. Should we talk Hall of Fame?
Is the Well, here's a question for you. Is the Hall of Fame really relevant anymore? I mean, I'll be honest with you. I think it's kind of a relic of a bygone age, and who pays attention to it anymore?
I mean, I think people care, but I don't feel like the ferocious arguments are there the way they were. And I do think that a huge part of that, it started with Pete Rose and then the whole steroid thing, and just the fact that nobody really believes that the best players are in the Hall, right? I mean, you could go there and it's like, okay, there's no Barry Bonds and there's no Roger Clemens, and like just the idea that there's this whole second secret agenda as you look down the ballot of who gets considered and who doesn't, based on how much evidence, or in some cases suspicion, there is of steroids. And I think that's really kind of it's done an enormous amount of damage to the Hall. And I really honestly think they would have been better off letting all those guys in.
Yeah, well, I can't disagree with whether those guys should be in or not, but it seems to me the Hall kind of goes back from from an era when you had to do a lot of work to get the statistics of of older players, and you couldn't really see, there was no video of of them playing or highlights, and all of that stuff is very accessible now and broken down in a million different ways. The only use, I mean, there's two uses. One is it's a really nice place to visit, and the town is really nice. Something to do besides going to the kind of when you want to take a break from the really nice breweries in the in the area. You drop into the Hall of Fame. The other thing is for arguments like this, where you can argue about how good or dissect how good the different players are, and compare them to the guys that like compare them to your Pete Rose or Clemens or whoever you want to compare them to, and complain about the guys who really should be in, and for whatever ridiculous reasons aren't getting voted in. The whole process where you can build up your votes over time, like over 10 years. I see the momentum growing for so and so. It's like, it's kind of bogus. I mean, what's that about?
Yeah, I mean, it's like a political campaign in some senses. The idea that the people only want to vote for the guy who they think is getting votes, right? I mean, there is one thing we should note is that it still means a heck of a lot to the ball players. And every interview you see every year when they talk to the guys who get in and the speeches, it means a lot.
Yeah. I'm going to jump into the big screen. Hey, here's Pete. Gary Sheffield didn't get in, and folks often use the eye test, or they talk about like, I never thought Todd Helton was the main guy. Like, you're an East Coast guy. Did you actually ever see Todd Helton play? And get up late in the game? Well, we all saw Gary Sheffield play, and we saw how much of a menace he was at the plate. And if you want to tell me that he wasn't special, that he didn't destroy pitches, I just don't believe you. He dominated the game in a way that only a few people can. There's been 23,114 ball players ever, and only a few of them have ever dominated the strike zone like he did. And the sports writers didn't see fit to put him in, 75% of them. I think the problem is not necessarily the Hall. I think it's the front line. I think it's the gate. And there's a lot of personality problems. Yes, Gary Sheffield spoke his mind, and he was a dick sometimes to the sports writers. That's not a discriminating factor on whether or not you're a great ball player or not. We've seen that a lot of, Kurt Schilling's an asshole. We get it. Barry Bonds was a dick to people. Okay, great. But, that doesn't mean you're not a great ball player. I watched Gary Sheffield take pitches that pitchers thought were good pitches. I've seen the interviews where they're like, no, Gary Sheffield just hit my best pitch. It didn't matter what I did. I couldn't get him out. That's a Hall of Famer. And that's one of the biggest problems. You have great players who are being ignored. Clearly, one of the best 1% of players ever is Gary Sheffield. In Pete's opinion, 500 home runs, came up as a teenager.
509, by the way. But
509, right? Yeah. I mean, he's remarkable, and nobody who saw him play in the mid 90s when he was one of the best ball players ever, maybe a tier below Barry Bonds, which is a very high tier to be at. Nobody said, oh yeah, it's great having him bat against my team. There's no way that guy's coming through. Like, no, they thought the opposite. They thought, oh Christ, this guy's going to destroy us. Like, let's get past, hopefully we get past Gary Sheffield because he can change the game in an instant. So yeah, the writers and how they're approaching it, or the way they're picking them, or when you hand in a ballot with just two names and it's not even, it's hard to take some of the writers seriously, and then they don't stand up and defend their ballot. I think there's a problem there.
Yeah, I don't understand why. Okay, obviously I'm prejudiced. He was a Yankee. He was a Yankee. That I remember one story about Sheffield when the Yankees were playing Boston. He had been on the I think at the time they were calling it the disabled list, and got doctors got cleared from the doctor at like 11 a.m. or something, and threw his gear into the car and drove up to make the game. I mean, he's a real gamer. What I don't understand. I don't know. Did people vote against him because of bad feelings? As some people have been implying. But are the writers now, the sport? Are the people voting now? Or did they have firsthand dealings with him? While he was a player. I mean, there's been a bit of turnover. I would think. The other thing, I mean, I don't know, 500 home runs. Maybe there's a reaction against that. Oh, that's an old that's an old statistic. It used to be that you had 500 home runs. Well, I don't believe in those old numbers anymore. You got to go with WAR or what. Where he also looks pretty good, but I don't know.
Yeah, and I mean, he's very high on base percentage, guys. I mean, he's the overall offensive wrecking crew. I mean, clearly, other than sort of the steroid odor, I mean, the other thing I know that haunted Sheffield a bit from early in his career, because he was really, immature when he came up, and didn't handle the big leagues real well he had a reputation in Milwaukee of like kind of making errors on purpose and like just trying to get himself out of town, which he turned out to be very good at getting out of town wherever he was. But yeah, I mean, Sheffield was a monster, and he in some ways similar to Dick Allen. I think he was a guy who was very similar ball player. And sometimes similar personality, but also, Sheffield was a guy who became a much more durable day in, day out, play hurt kind of guy when he was, when he was in his prime, much unlike kind of how he was viewed, in his early 20s.
Yeah, he matured. He grew up.
Yeah. And he admitted later on, like he had made a mistake in saying the stuff about the purposeful errors, and there was research. It's like we actually can't find those errors. And
it was him popping off.
Right. Yeah, he's popping off. And you had a mouthy black guy up in Milwaukee, and it's like, yeah, that didn't sit well. Who's the asshole, us or them, kind of thing. It's like, we have to give some grace for a 19 to 20-year-old guy who's from Florida living at a complete, some of that stuff. But we got to be better than that, right? Like, let's look at him at his best and go, that guy, terrifying. On the ball field, you can't be better than that. Yeah, he was young and he was an idiot. So was, Pete Rose's whole life. It's questionable, I mean, of course, he's not in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I was going to say, but Pete's not in. I suppose Well, I think Rose belongs in, but I think you could probably make a better argument that Rose, because he bet on the game and because that is such a huge negative, you can make the argument there that's logical. The thing with the steroids, though, yes, now they're banned, and that's that. But the but there were a lot of guys doing it in that era, and certainly he deserves to, well, I'll get off the soapbox, but there's certainly players that deserve to be in, and would have been in whether they used steroids or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my test was always, because look, I get keeping out like Shoeless Joe, for example, right? Because to me, the really big red line is guys who threw games, right? And you're throwing games, you're going in the wrong direction. And even Rose, I mean, I thought Rose ought to be banned from active involvement in the game because of his his betting. But it seemed to me that if you looked at both Rose and the steroid guys, the basic test to me is, would these guys trying to win? And I mean, first of all, everybody who ever watched Pete Rose can tell you that every game he played, every inning, every game he managed, he did it like he had money riding on it, right? And
he did.
And the steroid guys, they broke the rules, they broke the law to try to get an edge on the field. Boy, there's a long history of that in the game of baseball. It's deep in the game, so it's just silly to me.
The other thing about the steroid era is people tend to attribute all of that to steroids, but the reality is you look at Barry's career, and when did he start taking the steroids? Was it the 98 off season, and then everything forward from 99 to 2007? Well, okay, everything before that is pretty fucking incredible. And he was untouchable, and he already had broken the game. And then what also happens? Well, you have the second round of expansion comes in. So people like Dennis Martinez hang around in the game because they just need pitchers. And so if all are in the game as the game tries to flex out capacity on the pitching side, because
Yeah, I mean, I think clearly one that we had a bunch of factors there with the expansion of the pitching staffs, the switch to the whip handle bats, the guys who just started lifting weights, and there was a lot of gray area there, even in terms of what were people doing nutritionally. So
yeah, absolutely. I think that a lot of that's
all right, I'm back. I'm back.
There he is.
I was going to say, so pitching had to catch up, the capacity, right? We also had known that it was okay to lift weights. And so guys were like, now had a lot of time to lift weights and eat right food. Like all these things came through at the same time, where there was a video. Everybody's watching video now and able to track and save and understand so scouting got better. All of these things came through at the same time. And so you're like, how much of this is steroids and how much of this is just an advancement of the game across several different planes? And yeah, I'm not saying steroids don't help you, but it's not all steroids.
No, it's not all steroids. But on the other hand, let's not go let's not go in the totally other direction. Obviously, steroids did.
Right. Yeah, for sure. But like when you show
also a lot of other guys
and old Mark McGwire and say, look how big he got. Like, yeah, he went from being 23 to 35. He lifted weights his entire life. So some of that is natural and some of that is steroids.
Right. And there were also pitchers who were doing, steroids as well, and improving theirs, and the game has evolved, and now you can't use steroids, and, so it's a different era.
Yeah.
I mean, McGwire was a big lanky guy, but if you looked at Mark McGwire when he was 23 and you asked people, forget steroids, you ask people, is this guy going to put on 50 pounds of muscle by the time he's 30? Probably most scouts would have been like, heck yeah.
Yeah, right.
Like, just look at the frame on that guy.
Yeah. And look at his big brother Dan, that guy was
49 home runs as a rookie.
Yeah. Yeah. And he didn't hit gentle home runs. He hit this kind. Oh my God. Those are the home runs he hit, And so again, steroids matter, but when you try to wash out where it's at, like someone like Greg Vaughn, you can see it. Like there's this spike, but then he's gone from the game in terms of being relevant, But if you were great, you were still great. It doesn't, it's very hard to say only this much is steroids versus all of this that's off the screen. Just the impact is overblown, I would say. All right.
Well, it leaves us speechless.
What else do we want to cover? We got like 20 minutes.
Well, I want to know.
Yeah.
What I want to know is why I noticed that the one Dodger fan in this conversation hasn't said one word about the Dodgers and their prospects this year. You don't like to gloat. You just want to hear from the New York guys.
Well, I was trying to leave room for you guys, like legitimately, and I expected Jerome to be here, so I thought really honestly that we were going to focus on the New York side. The Dodgers debuted, I think, 11 or 12 prospects last year. It's amazing, but it's also crazy that, the Dodgers are great at doing the talent thing. They discover, rediscover, rehab internationally. They do. This is an interesting conversation that we can talk about the Dodgers, but in general, the off the field game is so important in driving the on the field game. So like if you think you're going to go out and sign, I don't know, free agent 5 and be competitive on the field, I'm telling you right now, the Dodgers are going to spend $100 million off the field in lottery, like lottery tickets. So they're going to go sign Tommy Cannoli, who you guys have on the Yankees now. And they're like, we'll spend money on this guy rehabbing and we'll get a season, maybe 2 seasons out of him, maybe, but boy, it's going to be a bargain. And they go out and they find these guys who are coming up. I mean, they draft guys who are just having Tommy John, and they're like, we'll sit on him. And he would be a first round pick. But because we don't get first round picks because we're always finishing at the top of the standings, we'll take this kid and we'll bet on him. And so they always get these great picks that are better than what they should get because they'll go long on the injury side, right? So they do that. So that off the field gambling and quality and talent development, I mean, there's Dodger prospects on almost every roster because they just develop so much of it. They harvest that and turn that into people's already proven, guys that have life in them. They'll say, oh, that's a good guy. We'll give you 2 of our young guys for 1 of your good guys. Bam. And they've improved their roster. So they do that at a high level. So, yeah, they have a lot of young talent, but they are great at developing it and harvesting that and turning that into more major league talent.
Yeah, and you need to have. I mean, the thing is, you can put all that money and you say put all that money on spec, basically.
Right.
But the thing is, you got to do it well, right?
Yeah.
Because like if you look at the Mets, like they took a flyer on Carlos Carrasco, they're taking another flyer on Luis Severino, and like in the abstract, hey, it's not my money, right? I don't really mind them throwing money at those guys. I do mind them throwing like 100 innings at them. And, at the major league level, like those are, the innings that you have and the at-bats you have, those cost you.
Right.
If you spend them badly.
Yeah.
Well, Severino, if he stays healthy, which is a huge if, is a really good pitcher. His problem through his career is that he hasn't stayed healthy. So
yeah,
if he throws 100 innings, he's going to pitch very well. The question is if he throws even half that many innings.
Right. Yeah, and that is one of the things the Dodgers do well is they'll find someone and they'll say, whoever it's going to be, we'll just say pitcher X, and they'll say, hey, we don't want you to even bother with your fastball. We just want you to focus on your slider, just throw that, and we're just going to throw you in these like this. These 70 innings in the year, just throw your slider. That's it. And they're so good at, and they pay a guy to go out and just look for these people. And then they pick that guy up for a song or maybe off of the DFA wire and go, oh my God. And they look at their entire roster as being like these 40 guys, but also these guys, these 20 guys, and they just lift their floor of their franchise all the time so that their floor is so damn high. That's just one of the remarkable things that they do. And that is the power of money. Like when people talk about what the Dodgers do well, sure, this year they signed Ohtani and, all these other players, but that's not their norm. Their norm is to go out and just constantly lift the floor of the franchise while having a couple of the top guys.
How did LA become, such a well-run franchise? Is it just the money, or was there a plan
Andrew
too?
Friedman kind of cracked the code when he was at the Rays, and so when they brought him over to run the franchise, he
Mhm.
wasn't bound by budget anymore. And then he hired other GMs to work under him, and so he broke the GMs into different areas. And
Mhm.
so, like, they have this guy Gasparino who runs the player development side, and he is just great at finding talent wherever they are internationally. Off the people who are released or people who are injured, and like we think there's life left in you. And so like they signed Cole Hamels.
Right.
He never pitched for the Dodgers, but they're like, hey, if we can get you healthy, didn't work, $1 million, we don't care, right? And so there's a lot of these bets that don't pay off, but when they do, it works for them.
Mhm. No, it's joking aside, the Dodgers are a very good organization, even though they're
Yeah.
going to fall on their faces this year.
No, but that's the thing is you work so hard, right? And no matter what you do, the best team that goes into the playoff, I think right now wins it 18% of the time. So not even 1 in 5 if you're the best team, right? And so that's the thing. That's like fans get upset when whoever the fans are. Like I'm also an A's fan, and I watch my precious A's fans who are like, they never go to the World Series, and I'm like, you think it's automatic to get there? It is not. It's like it is very hard.
Absolutely. Although some of our teams have been there more than others, but not that we'd like to brag.
Yeah, well, everybody points at the Phillies and go, "Look how great they are." And you're like, "Yeah, but they were exciting, but they, it's hard to win. It's hard to win this whole thing. You get someone gets hot, someone doesn't. Luck. I mean, the Giants were never the best team when they won their last 3 World Series. They just,
I don't know about that. They were
they
pretty
were they were a wild card team twice. They pitched well. They hit at the right times. They were led well, but you would never bet on them going into the playoffs. You would say, "Oh, this team is better," or whatever.
That's actually a good question, whether finishing first in your, and I know they've been trying to change that, but finishing first in your division isn't necessarily, it doesn't mean what it used to mean. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're the best team, even on paper. Sometimes
That's true.
it's injury. The other thing that injuries play such a huge role these days, even in baseball. I mean, if Judge, I could make an argument that if Judge had not been hurt, that the Yankees might have snuck into the playoffs there. I think that's a reasonable argument. I don't think they would have gone very far, but injuries are huge. You really need a good medical staff, and I guess.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, the way in which pitchers in particular are used, but in the way in which even the sort of managing of injuries in the regular season. I mean, teams aren't playing to win the division in the same way that they used to because they know it's not the end. And I mean, that's why what the Dodgers have been doing is so interesting, which is sort of stockpiling a lot of guys who are really good arms who just have absolutely no prayer of throwing anything close to 200 innings. And you're just gonna try to mix and match as many of those as you can. And maybe you're gonna have to accept the fact that some of the guys on your staff are there to get you through the end of July, and then they're just not going to be pitching anymore by October. But you've got other guys who are coming online.
Yeah, that's wild, right? I mean, when we were young kids and you're watching Nolan Ryan or whoever it is, the ball was regularly straight or it went down. Now the ball comes in at 100 and shoots sideways, and boy, you can tell that hurts the arm because I mean, when the Dodgers were talking, when everybody was talking about Ohtani, and I'm like, this guy's on his third elbow, and he got 84 starts out of the last one. Like, he's not going to make it another 84 starts on his third elbow, so he's not really a pitcher. You're not really signing that. Maybe he'll be a reliever or something, but it's just not.
And the money assumes that he's a two-way player because he's a good hitter, but he's not worth anywhere near that kind of money just as a hitter. So, I mean, they obviously can can fix stuff on these guys. I mean, one of my all-time favorite, stories about the pitcher is Carl Hubble. He threw the screwball. If you've ever seen his windup, it's painful to watch. But like literally, his arm hung with his palm facing outward by the time his career was done because he just wrenched his palm, it wrenched his wrist so many times. It just hung that way permanently.
That's a wicked pitch, the screwball. But he had a lot of. Yeah, well, pitching is just so much different now. How many? If you really want to place a weird bet how many complete games there will be in 24.
What's the over under?
I would say 10 is probably the over.
Oh man, that's a good number.
I'll
take the under. What's the bet going to be? Something gentle.
I don't know. We'll have to figure that out.
Okay. All right. All right. Yeah, I was going to say also Walker Buehler on his third elbow, and the other Dodger pitcher May. He came back. He made not even 5 starts, and he's like, I got to go back in to get a new elbow, because he, it's crazy. Bill James put together a little article on his Bill James Online, and he's like, we got to find something different. Like it used to be that you didn't have to throw 100 miles an hour to get guys out. So how do we find people that can do that, and work? Jamie Moyer could throw 60 miles an hour and get guys out, right? Deception was a thing that didn't have to be based on speed. And so he was like, how do you find talent? How do you find value in guys that do something different?
Well, deception is still very important. And that's, and again, the whole thing behind the whole, theory of, the third time through the lineup, et cetera. And what's really going on there is obviously the pitcher's getting a little bit tired and the breaking stuff's not breaking as much. Your spin rate's kind of dying. But the other thing is that, batters they're used to the stuff and they're not getting deceived. And, and again, that's something that, that you would not have seen, I think even 15 years ago, right? The whole thing. Pitchers, would work routinely deep into games, even though, they were still getting hit. So,
yeah.
Right. I remember seeing like Bruce Sutter when he was with the Cubs, and people hadn't seen the split finger pitch before, and he just made big league stars look like little leaguers, like just flailing out there. It's absolutely unhittable. So I'm still a big fan of the sidearmers, the Submariners. I think there's still an awful lot of value to those guys compared to the amount of talent it takes to actually do that, which is not as much as it takes to be a successful big league pitcher, throwing overhand.
Yeah, I think they're great coming in for an inning or so, especially after, you've had somebody like, whoever, throwing 90, 95 miles an hour, 100 miles an hour. And now all of a sudden you have somebody with an entirely different, wind up and, it's like, wow, where is he coming from? And again, it's, adjustment and deception. And then, we have to, then there was, Mariano Rivera. Everybody knew what he was going to throw.
Right.
And yet you couldn't really hit it very far. There's still some guys like that. Yeah.
It just, even if you did hit it, it just mostly destroyed your bat. And so you were just like, hey, went into the outfield, like I'm safe, Like when they lost to the Diamondbacks in the World Series.
I was just thinking about that one. Yeah.
It wasn't that they lost the game. It was just that, like, it worked out for the Diamondbacks. It wasn't like, hey, we really destroyed the Yankees. It was like, no, we just got lucky, Like, and I'm not trying to.
I can feel the pain from here.
I know. It's like when Joe Montana would like drop the ball and it would bounce into someone's hand and they would be like first down, and it was like, oh my God, it was like the dumbest thing. And then all of a sudden, it's crazy.
Yeah. I knew you'd bring that up. I'm
not trying to rub it in. I swear to God. That's what the thing about Mariano is, like, if you happen to beat him, you didn't beat him. It's just the law of averages allowed you to overcome this thing. That's all it is. This is in no way a rub against that. This is another thing that's interesting too. Is when we look at closers, Billy Wagner almost gets in, probably will get in next year, maybe.
Mhm.
And there are folks that get mad about that. And this man, his average outing, look, if you're a major league manager, like, hey, we got Billy Wagner, we're going to sign this guy. He's going to play for you for about 17 years or so. His average outing is going to be a save. He'll strike out 2 guys, probably put 1 guy on base. Do you want him? Every manager is going to be like, fuck yeah, I'll take that guy.
Yeah, no
And
doubt.
people think that's not a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, well, obviously, I think the question of whether Billy Wagner is a guy you want on the mound with your season on the line is one that maybe Mets fans would not answer as affirmatively as the other teams he pitched for. I mean, there's no question Wagner is Hall of Fame quality player. The question is really, a guy with his, just never pitched the huge number of innings, and he doesn't have that sort of weird postseason superhuman thing that Mariano had. Quite the contrary. In fact, he had a terrible postseason record. So, I mean, I'm kind of skeptical of Wagner. If you're going to have closers in there, modern closers, I certainly see the case for him being one of the great ones. But, again, that's partially my Mets fandom talking, though, too. We didn't exactly witness him on his best days.
That's for sure.
In big games in particular.
Yeah. And then you're looking at the reality that probably Kenley Jansen is going to be the number 3 in terms of saves, possibly, if he keeps at it, number 2 in terms of saves. And then Kimbrel, if he can hold some kind of pace, again, looking at 4th all time in saves, and a load of strikeouts with these guys. And, 15 to 20-year careers, depending on how long these guys go. That's also significant.
Mm-hmm.
But when these guys blow up, everybody sees it. Everybody remembers, Kenley not shutting down the World Series for the Dodgers. And so are these guys Hall of Famers? I personally think they're both future Hall of Famers right now. If they got hit by a bus, like, oh man, those guys died tragically, we're going to put them in the Hall of Fame in 5 years.
One thing that's hard to take into account from the, just looking at numbers and stuff is the amount of pressure that they're under, because, the game literally is on the line, and, everybody is paying attention to them and is going to blame them if they, if the team loses, as opposed to, a pitcher that might have given up a run in the 5th inning or whatever. So, I don't know how you figure that in. I mean, obviously, I don't vote for the Hall of Fame, but I don't know how you figure that into the equation for the Hall. So,
yeah. Dan?
Yeah, and I think it is true that Rivera creates kind of an unrealistic bar there, right? Because he was just in another universe in the postseason. But I mean, I kind of feel like another way of looking at that, though, is that his postseason numbers put beyond any doubt the question of whether a guy with that kind of regular season workload belongs to the Hall of Fame. But again, clearly we've crossed that river with a couple of other guys. So, I mean, Jansen kind of reminds me of like Lee Smith, that kind of career.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. Yeah. And maybe he's better than Lee Smith, maybe not. Like the Gossages and the Fingers, those guys don't resemble in any way the modern closer.
mm-hmm.
And we're also not accounting for this new like high leverage guy who's not a closer, but he's the guy you bring in when the game is on the line. Or like, if we can get through this inning and keep the lead, and like O'Day is one of these guys who drops down and does the sidearm thing. And, he does that for a few more years, and all of a sudden you're like, this is not a guy that you recognize as a Hall of Famer, but here he is keeping his team in the game when it matters the most.
We'll have to, there are statistics for that. We'll have to, give those more prominence, I guess.
Yeah, because starters aren't going to get elected anymore, it seems like. Not at the old pace.
No, I don't know about that. That I think is, I think Cole, for instance, I mean, I don't know if he's a shoe-in, but probably, 2 more decent seasons he probably is.
Yeah.
There's pitchers.
Certainly, Verlander and Scherzer are both going.
Yeah.
Kershaw's going in. So
Yeah,
Sure.
but we're running out of names.
and I think quite likely Greinke.
Yeah, Greinke should get it. Greinke should get it. Is Verlander going to get to 300? He's definitely within range.
Does he stay healthy?
Yeah, I mean, he wants it. That's the first thing. And nobody gets there before 40. So, yeah, if he stays healthy, does he get there?
I don't think he has enough gas in the tank for how much further he has to go. So,
Yeah, I'd love to see it. As long as it's not against the Yankees, of course.
What if he comes to the Yankees to get it? Then you want him to get it. He pitches for you guys.
A, he's not going to come to the Yankees, and B, of course, I'd be rooting for anybody in pinstripes. Even you, Pete. If you're out there, I'd be cheering you on.
Yeah. Hey, I'm ultimately a baseball fan, so I'll root for the Mets. I'll root for the Yankees. I'll root for any team in California. I want everybody to have a great game. I am the guy I'm rooting for, and I swear to God, this is true. The guy I'm rooting for most this year to have a great year is Giancarlo Stanton. I want to see him hit 40 home runs. 50 home runs would be great. I know it's impossible for that, but if he hit 35 home runs, I'd be tickled for that dude. I really want him just to have a regular ball smashing year. That would be great. That's the guy I want to see do the best.
That'd be a great story because as a human being, he's a great a great person. Although so is Ohtani, but I don't want to see Ohtani hit 60 home runs. But
yeah. Well, so who are you rooting for then, Jim? Who's your guy that you want to see do well this year?
Well, I want to see every player on the Yankees do well.
There you go.
I want to see Volpe, kind of come into his own. Maybe
all
mature, right. But I will be rooting for every Yankee. So
perfect. And Dan, who do you want to see do well?
That's a good question. I mean, certainly on the Mets, one guy I would really love to see have a big bounce back year is Jeff McNeil, who is just an awful lot of fun to watch when he's clicking on all cylinders. I mean, that whole sort of offensive core when they're really doing it, McNeil and Alonso and Lindor and Nimmo, and then to be able to add on, Francisco Alvarez. So,
does Alvarez break out this year or what?
I think so. I mean, he broke out power wise last year and was remarkably much better defensively than people had expected.
Okay.
But he's obviously still got to work on his batting average, plate discipline, and such. I mean, the guy that was really painful, the most painful in a sense this year was Beatty, because the Mets really had high hopes for him, and he, it's one thing to have a bad year, but he never even had like a 2-week period where he was a star. Like young players, it's one thing to watch them go through a funk, but he never had a hot streak, and that was really unpleasant.
Everybody, and I wonder how much of that is like it's the New York hype, and and I'm sure other places are guilty of it, but New York, both the Mets and the Yankees, fans, we just if the guy doesn't produce right away, we're just down on the guy.
Yeah,
that's not really fair, but that's the way it is.
That's the pressure, right? Yeah. Chicago, same thing. Like how fast do they turn on Sammy Sosa? This guy that gave him all this joy, and they're like, "Fuck that guy!" It's like you kick him out of town. No use for him anymore. Philadelphia, same thing. If you go bad, and boy. By the way, everybody listening, I'm going to have next Friday, Kelly Franco Throop and I are going to do another baseball show. That'll be fun. She's awesome. Anything in closing, fellas, before we wrap this up?
I think that I think we're going to have the host make a prediction on what teams are going to be in the World Series.
Oh man, that's tough. So I do think the Yankees make the playoffs, and I'm not sucking up. I do think that there's a balancing of luck that happens in the game, and it did not go your guys' way last year. So I think that it will go your guys' way this year. I think that the Rays will have less luck, and so you guys will scoop most of that up, and it'll balance out. I think the Phillies will have less luck, and I think that there will be some balancing. I think the Dodgers will have about the same amount of luck. They'll make the playoffs, but it's just so hard. So I'm not going to pick the Dodgers to do anything special. But I don't know. It's hard to know. I don't know. I'm not saying the Yankees are going to go to the World Series because it's just too hard to guess that. It'd be hilarious if the A's made the playoffs, just because so many A's fans are so shitty about the A's. I would like to see them be tormented, and I'm an A's fan, so I'll pick the A's to make the playoffs. The Yankees make the playoffs, and hilarity to ensue there. Those are my fun picks. That's what I've got. What about you, Jim? Since you're going to put me on the spot, what do you got?
Well, I don't think the A's. I think I can safely say the A's won't make the playoffs. Obviously, I think the Yankees are going to, go all the way to the World Series. But if I weren't picking the Yankees, I would. I like Baltimore. I think
Yeah,
I
it's a
like
good
a
pick.
lot. Baltimore really has done a lot. For some reason, they were overlooked last year, which was silly. I mean, that's actually a really good team. They
Really
play
good
really good baseball. And I think, unfortunately, for you, I hate to say it because it's going to be tough, Pete, but you're going to have to just bear with it. I think the Dodgers will be in the World Series next year.
Oh man, I'm gonna have to deal with it. Well, listen, the Padres had no luck last year, and so I respect the Padres game. So we'll see. Dan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know that I'm ready to make predictions. I mean, I do think I was going to say that the Orioles really do look like the coming team.
It's a good team.
They had a magical year, and I think most of it was concentrated in the development of good young players who are only getting better. And there certainly are some other guys around the game that I'd love to see have. There are always those guys who are kind of hurt a lot that you'd love to see. I would love to see Mike Trout put in a full healthy season again and be the Mike Trout we've seen before. I'd love to see somebody like Byron Buxton stay healthy and kind of show what he can do over a full season. So some of those guys like that I think I'd just like to see them really be able to do it. I don't know. I mean, I'm enough of a pessimist. I think the Braves are going to be very tough to knock off again.
They're going to be very tough to knock off.
And,
I do like
and
the
of
fact
course
that
the Dodgers.
I like that we got the Rangers knocked off the never won list, and so I'm always a fan of the teams that have never won. So let's get the Mariners a nice deep run. That'd be great, and gosh, I don't know, maybe the Brewers and Mariners going deep and not great for TV ratings, but great for franchises that have never won.
Yeah, Seattle really came
interesting.
unglued in a very unpleasant way down the stretch last year, but they have a lot of young talent. So.
Yeah, Jim, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I actually Seattle Brewers. That would. You're right. That'd be terrible for ratings, but but for baseball fans, I think that'd be great.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to run these credits. Thanks, fellas. Hang around and I'll say goodbye to you.
Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly. Thank